All right, so now we can say so far that we've set up at least the basics for what we need to start creating users in our database. But however, there's something we need to do though, and that is to have a way that we can handle errors that occur in our application. So let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to do a quick example. First off, in this my register function, I don't want it to be asynchronous. Let it just be a regular arrow function. So I'll come here. Now, when a user wants to register on your website, they need to add at least a username and a password. Okay, they can add other details, but at least an email, sorry, and a password. So here I'll just add an if statement, and I'll say that if the user does not add an email, or if the request does not have an email coming with it. So how am I going to get the request? I'll say request dot body, because it's in the body of the request that you put in your data, and then I'll say dot email. So if there's no email, well, I want to throw an error, or I want an error to be displayed. So first off, I can say response dot, and I'll add a status, because if you want to throw an error, then you need to give that error some kind of status. So for now, I'll just say 400 bad request. Now also, you can then throw an error. So Express has this its own error handler, kind of, that it can pick errors when there are errors in your application, and then just spit out that error. So the way you access it is you say throw new error, and then you just specify what the error is. So in this case, we know that the user has not added an email, so I'll just throw an instruction. I'll say please add an email. Simple as that. Great. So now let's go ahead and fire this from our Postman. So I'll just go ahead and save, and then I'll come to Postman. Let's just fire it and see. So I'll just click on fire. Aha. So you see, we already have this 400 bad request here, which is the status that we put here. Then you see here, it now says error, please add an email. You see what we're trying to do here. So technically what we just did is that we've used Express error handler, but if you look at this is somehow, it's not really fun to use this kind of error handler. So there is a better way, a more intelligent way that we can handle errors, and that's what we're going to create now. So I'll come here, I'll create it as a middleware, making it accessible to all my application. Remember, a middleware is just a function that you can execute between your response, your request, and your response cycle. That's just what a middleware is. So now let me come to this backend folder. I'll create a new folder inside of it, and I'll call that middleware. And inside of this folder, I'll create my very first middleware for this application, and that is the error middleware. Okay, .js. Hit enter on that one, and now let's go ahead and create our error middleware. So it's just going to be a regular arrow function that I'm going to call, forgive me, let me close this guy. Okay, so I'm going to call this arrow function error middleware as well. So we'll come here and we say error handler. I think that's a lot better. Great. Now this error handler is going to have some parameters. It's going to have access to an error, both the request and the response. So just like every other regular function, request, response, and next. So for the next piece of middleware to fire, or the next piece of function to fire. Now remember, our error has at least two properties. It has a message and a status code. So if you come back here to user controller, you'll see here the first thing we sent is a status code and at least a message. So I'll come to my error middleware, and that's what we're going to start with. So I'll say response.status. Now, how can we determine the status? So if I come here now and I say maybe something like 400, you know what that means? That means all our errors, anywhere I use this error handler, the status of that error is going to be set to 400. But that's not what you want. You want to be able to detect that the place this error is originating from, does it come with a status, its own status? If it does, then use that status. Then if it doesn't, give it your own status, like a general 500 status, which stands for server error. So what we can do is I can come here and I'll just use a ternary operator to check for that. So I'll say const and status code. So that is the status code I'm interested in. and that's going to be equal to, so first off we're going to check if there's a response dot status code, and if there is one, so let me copy that ternary operator. If there is one, I want to use it. If there is none, so else, I'll just give the error a status code of 500. Okay, so inside here I'll then use my status code. So status code. Okay, so you see what's happening. So we've handled the status of the error. The next thing is the error message. So how am I going to send the error message? Well, I'll just come down here and I'll say response.json, because that's the format we want to use to send our message. And then we're just going to give it a property of message like so, and I'll just catch the error dot message, and this error is actually coming from this guy, which in turn will come from this our error here. So this technically is our error dot message. Now there's one other property that we can access from our error handler, and that is the origin of the error. So if you look very closely at this error we have here, you see here that this error is coming from this register user controller. Then it now gives us the location of the error. So you see, okay, I think I need to scroll down. I just want to show you the location of the error. Yeah, so you see it's telling us that it's in our backend folder, controllers folder, and user controller.js line 4. This location is known as a stack. So technically we have access to the point or the stack where the error is coming from. So we can access that here. So I'll just come to this response.json and then I'll say stack ACK, and that's just going to be error.stack. So error.stack like so. Now this is fine, but personally I would not like my error stack to be displayed on production. So maybe if my site is live and there's an error, I would not like that error stack, this code here, to be spat out. So what I want is only display the error stack to me while I'm in production. In other words, while I'm developing my application here. So what I'll do is that I'll create a new variable in my .env file. I'll call that variable node underscore env, okay, which is the node environment. And this variable also exists in most cloud most hosting servers like Heroku. I'm sure of Heroku. The node env is set to production, but in our case here we're going to set it to development. I'll save that so that my server will restart. Oh, okay, it's not restarting my server. When I save something else, the server will restart. So here, instead of just pointing to the stack, I'll say that if process.env is .node underscore env is equal to development, then I want to show the stack. So here I'll just put my question mark and show the stack, else I want to not show anything, so null. Okay, so you get what we just did here. Now that so technically this is what our error handler looks like. So the last thing we need to do is just export it so that it can be accessible from different points of our application. So here I'll just say module.export, and I'll set that to be equal to error handler, which is what we just created anyway. Great. Go ahead and save. Then the last, well, I'm used to saying the last thing, or the next thing we need to do is to make sure that this error handler is accessible from the top of our application. In our case, that's server.js. So I'll come to server.js and I'll import it. So let me just come here and say const error handler, and that's going to be equal to require, open your parenthesis, where is the function located, / middleware, and then / error handler.js. All right, so now we've imported it. Now we need to call it. So there is an important thing to note when you are calling your error handler. It needs to be at the bottom of this your server.js. So just before we connect, but just before we fire the server, so on top here I'll just add a comment and say error middleware, and then I'll just call it. So it's error handler, Okay. Oh, I'm not just going to call it like this. It's a middleware, so it needs to be inside app.use. So app.use and then error handler. Great. So this is the setup for our error handler. Our server will restart and then we'll get access to everything in .env file. Now let's go ahead and fire off our what's it called, this guy here. And remember, if I wanted to add an email, I'll just come here and maybe use a form or JSON. If I use JSON, I'll just have to specify it by myself, but let me make life easy for us and let's just use a form URL encoded, and I'll just say email here, email, and I'll just set an email. So the email is going to be Zeno, or maybe I should not set an email, I'll leave it empty. And oh, there's an error here. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Okay, response to status code. Okay, let me just check that. Sorry, error handler. Okay, so I don't think there's anything wrong here, but let me just save this file again. Maybe I should just save my server.js one more time. And so apparently I'm still getting that error, and let me just see. Oh, okay, I think I figured out where the error is coming from. It's coming from my server.js, this place where I call this error handler. I'm not supposed to put this parenthesis here. It's just supposed to be referencing this error handler here. Okay, so just go ahead and save that, and that's all we needed to have done. So if you scroll down, you will see that everything will just restart, and we now have server running on port 500. Great. So now let's go ahead and fire off this our controller function without adding this email property. So I'll come here, I'll send. Aha, so you see we now have something that is more presentable. We have a message and it says please add an email, and then because we're in development, we now have this stack. You notice that if you come to this .env file and change this development to something else, maybe production, and save, okay, then let me just restart the server. I'll just save this server.js to restart it so that it has access to that new change in the .env file. Okay, great. Now if I come here and send one more time, watch what happens. Voila. So you see, we just get the message, please add an email, and the stack says null. So if we're in production, when we've deployed to the cloud, we're not going to have the stack, so people will not be able to trace exactly where our error is coming from. All right, so that's about it for our error handler. And what this means now is that we can use this error handler in, let me just change this back, we can use it across different places in our application. So that's about it for this one. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.